Welcome to Inkwell Spoken Presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today my guest is Brittany Lee. Brittany, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
I would venture to say, Brittany, that you are an adventurous person. I might be wrong, because this is our first time meeting off the strength of a mutual friend that we have who did this interview a few weeks ago. So I do want to thank you for taking the risk and talking to me today.
You're welcome.
So I want to jump right into it. If you heard the name of the interview series, is also the name of my book. And what I've been doing is I've just been identifying genius in a way that is pretty atypical to how we typically would think of and fashion this word. So I want to jump right into it with my first question to you, which is, Brittany, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
No.
All right, so that's okay. I'm going to ask that question again in 60 minutes, and hopefully we might get a different answer. You fall in the majority of people. I've done this as workshops with between 50 and 300 people, and I've done this for the past year in one-on-one sessions, and the vast majority of people answer in the negative to that question. So thank you for being a little transparent and candid in that. My next follow-up question begins to give some insight to why most people say no to that question. So you ready for the second one?
I am.
Who comes to mind when you hear that word genius?
When I hear the word genius, Albert Einstein.
There it is. You're on a roll. That is the number one answer that I get from adults and youth alike. And what I'm here to do is not to take away anything from Einstein and his genius, because he was in fact a genius. However, he was just one type of genius. And what I've seen over time is that people don't know how vast the spectrum of genius is. And because they don't know how vast it is, they don't see themselves in it. Because we attribute genius to somebody. I don't know, maybe I don't really think you look like Einstein at all. And neither do I, right? And so when we attribute genius to someone that we can't identify with, whether physically, culturally, or whatever, it can be difficult for us to then define it to ourselves. And Einstein specifically, because he had this genius mind in physics, we'll look at him and say, okay, he's a genius. We'll put him on this pedestal, but then we'll put that word, that label, that affirmation on the pedestal as well. And it'll be just out of reach of who we are. So we'll disassociate it from ourselves because of who we associate it with. What do you think about that?
That's fair. I think that's a fair assessment. I never thought of genius as a spectrum.
Yeah. So the spectrum of it is, most of the time, the spectrum that we associate is that you must have a high GPA coming out of high school or college, and you must have taken some type of IQ test that was off the charts for you to be able to say that you're a genius. And I understand to a certain degree, most of us, would try to be humble and walk in humility and be like, well, I can't call myself that. I mean, we have people on the opposite end of that as well, like a Kanye West, who is very quick to tell you that he is a genius, right? And there was a documentary, I don't know if you saw it, I believe it was on Netflix. It was called Genius. It was spelled phonetically, but it was a documentary on the life of Kanye West. And at one point in the documentary, he's talking to Rhymefest, and Rhymefest co-wrote Jesus Walks with Kanye West. And they had this debate. And Kanye was like, yeah, I'm a genius. And Rhymefest was like, pump your brakes, man. You can't say that. He said, you have to show and prove your body of work over time so that other people identify you as genius. You can't say that for yourself. And Kanye argued, because he was like, look, man, and they show in the documentary how when he was a producer shopping around himself as a rapper, people kept writing him off. And he was so confident in himself and so really angry by everybody writing him off and putting him in a box, not allowing his spectrum to be wide enough, that he was just like, you know what, you won't affirm me, but I will. And I'm not saying that we should walk around with that type of hubris about us, but what I do like to do is define humility in a little more depth, because humility is not about not only thinking too highly of yourself, but it's not thinking too lowly of yourself either.
Yeah, that's true.
And so for us, for Black Americans, African Americans in a country that has seen us for many generations in a limited spectrum, it's very important for us to self-affirm. It's very important for young Black men to be able to self-affirm to a degree that when somebody else comes along and tries to put a label on you that doesn't fit you, that demeans you, you say, you know what, I know my inner value, my inner worth, I know my genius, don't put that on me. I'm greater than what you're trying to belittle me to. You feel me? Like we struggle with many labels as we're coming up into our formative years and we're getting out into society and we're trying to find how we fit. And other people who govern society will try to tell us like, no, you fit here. Because in their need to make the world make sense for them, they'll begin to say, well, this goes here and this goes there. And we do that. Other people do that to us by labels, right? And so if we don't know who we are, we may begin to acquiesce to some of the labels that other people are putting on us to make their world make sense. But at the same time, it diminishes who we are.
It's accurate. That's true.
All right, we starting off good. So I have a quote for you that I wanted to share. You got to let me know if you've heard it before, and then let me know how it hits you, if it's your first time hearing it, or go back in time to when you first heard it, and let me know how you process it. It purportedly comes from Albert Einstein. So you ready for the quote?
I am.
It goes like this. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid.
Yeah, I've heard it.
All right. So what does that say to you? What is that saying?
For me, well, how it kind of resonated is I'm an educator, or I was an educator in a life, if you will. And so you get students, especially at a Black college, an HBCU, you get students who come from various backgrounds, and they don't necessarily have the same opportunities by which the scale of society is holding them to. Mm-hmm. And so if they always think of themselves as the fish who can't climb the tree, they'll never realize that they can swim.
Exactly.
And that fish aren't meant to climb trees. They're in a body of water for a specific purpose, and everything that they have about them is guided towards their particular purpose, not their ability to climb a tree. They weren't built for it, you know. But I think if the scale is climbing a tree, then some people are going to be equipped because they have hands and feet and opposable thumbs, and some people aren't going to be equipped because they were born a fish.
Hey, you summarized that very well. What, if you don't mind me asking about your former past life, what did you teach? What was your field of education?
I was a college professor and I taught business.
Okay. And if you don't mind, because you know this is our first time formally meeting, what do you do now?
I'm a training specialist.
Training specialist. Okay. All right. So I like how, you know, to me, this quote is like poetry. Everybody has their own interpretation. But with this one, though the interpretation is based on the individual, there are certain key things that are kind of consistent, and you hit on those. There is a need to acknowledge what the fish is built for versus what it's being judged and asked to do. And, you know, fish have fins, gills, scales. They are streamlined. They are designed for water. But if you take a fish out of its element and try to judge it by how functional it is, or rather how dysfunctional it is, you rob the fish of its identity. You sold that fish short. And to your point, in this metaphor, the quote quickly turns into a metaphor to me. And I drag Einstein in it, and I'm like, Einstein is a bear. That dude climbs trees. But we shouldn't judge our genius by his ability, because I don't know physics like that. I know a little bit, but I don't know it to the extent that he knows it. And, you know, if I can pause for a second, Einstein's history is pretty interesting because he was misjudged as a child too. He was one of those kids that got a note home from the parents that was like, hey, you might want to make sure Albert here works with his hands because he's not doing too well in school. He's not picking up the material the way we need him to pick it up. And so he was being prejudged based off of a school system that needed people to think and pick up topics a certain way, and he didn't pick it up the way they wanted him to. And had he allowed those limiters to be placed on him, he would have been robbed of one of the greatest minds of physics. But he pushed on. I don't know how, I don't know why, but he pushed on. Even when he got into post-secondary school and he was in college, his professors would be like, Einstein, are you paying attention? He would be staring out the window and they would think he was daydreaming. But Brittany, do you know what he was doing when he was staring out that window?
Computations.
He was doing what he called thought experiments. I believe that's what he called it, where they weren't even like logical left brain computations. He was coming from a right brain thinker. He was thinking like, what would it look like to ride a beam of light from the sun to the earth? And as he began that thought experiment, he began to theorize and come up with the theory of relativity. And so, but that wasn't how his professors wanted him to think and receive the information that they were sending him. And so they were frustrated with him oftentimes. And that resonates because it sounds like our children at times, where we're in the classroom, we have a learning style, but that learning style isn't the method that's being taught to us, but we're told that we're the pariah, we don't fit in. And if we don't know that, hey, how I think and how I process information is unique to me, and it's my gift actually, then we may start to be convinced like that fish that maybe I'm stupid. Every time I go to a place, we'll get into the school system a little later because school systems really only teach from 3 learning styles and there's 8. But if you don't speak one of those 3 learning styles, you're going to be like that fish. Like, I feel like I must be dumb. Like, nobody is telling me explicitly I'm dumb, but I feel like I'm dumb every day. And so what genius is about is finding your element. What is your element? How do you define it so that you can, because I'll tell you what, I always in my mind, in my sanctified imagination, I see like a little island with this one single tree on it and a little fish grabbing onto the roots. And off to the right, outside of the picture, is somebody that's constantly coming by and telling this fish, you need to climb this tree, and asking this fish, have you climbed the tree yet? But then all around the fish is water. And it's so close to its element, but yet it's become so focused on what somebody else has said that it should be doing, that it's literally killing itself. Yeah. Did you know what happens when a fish stays out of water for too long, right?
Can't breathe.
It's going to die.
Yep.
It's going to die. And I feel like I see dying genius all around me, just latent genius. And it's my job to revitalize, resuscitate, and resurrect the dying genius that I see all around me. So how I want to do this as we move forward is to define genius or redefine it by 3 components. All right. It's the power of 3, I guess. It's passion, talent, and purpose. All right. You still with me?
I am.
Cool. So passion. We're going to do the same thing that we did with genius with passion. What words come to mind when you hear that word passion?
When I hear, for me, I think serve. Passion often relates to, for me, what I'm willing to give the most of myself to. So what I'm passionate about is what I'm willing to spend the most time on. So passion for me often relates to what I'm willing to give the most time to or sacrifice more for.
That's the word I heard when you started talking, like sacrifice. It's a sacrifice. It's serving a greater purpose. It's like a service project, right? And I agree. There's a lot of things that I've heard over the course of the past year as I'm doing these interviews. And some of the things that I hear, in addition to what you've said, are that, passion is the gas in your tank. It's the thing that gets you up in the morning. It's the thing that propels you forward. It's the thing that when you come in front of an obstacle, you either go through it, around it, over it, but it's the gas that gives you the energy to get through it and to progress forward, despite the obstacles, despite the failures, despite whatever it is. You're like, this is my thing. I'm driven, right? When I talk to youth, one of the things that they associate to passion is love. And, oftentimes when we start talking about, well, what is your career? What do you want to do? We say things like, well, you know what, do what you love. But Brittany, I'm going to flip the script a little bit. I'm going to come, we keep talking about spectrums. I'm going to come from the opposite end of the spectrum and relate passion, not to what you love, but to actually what you hate.
So
So
that's new.
that's new. Give me a second to explain. Now, in truth, I can't take credit for this. I read a book one time by a dude named Mike Murdoch called The Assignment. And what Mike Murdoch was saying was, he said, if you want to figure out what your assignment is, what you've been placed on the earth for, you know how the fish is placed on the earth to be in water and to swim. If you want to figure out what your assignment is, focus on what you hate, because there's a thing in the world that affects you in a negative way. Because let me pause for a second. Would you agree, Brittany, that the world is broken?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right?
Absolutely.
It's so broken in so many diverse ways that it impacts each of us differently in our own space. That brokenness that impacts us doesn't make us feel good. It makes us feel like a fish out of water, right? It makes us feel like, I don't know if I belong here. Why did that happen? It traumatizes us. A fish out of water gets traumatized. And so that traumatizing effect that happens to us, as we begin to kind of like deal with it and heal from it, whenever we see it functioning on us, on other people, we're like, man, I hate that. Because we think back to how it makes us feel. It makes a loved one feel. We're like, man, somebody should do something about that. I don't like that. And if you find yourself saying this often, whenever you see or encounter this thing, somebody should do something about that. Somebody should. Guess who the somebody is?
It's you.
It's you. But we keep looking, we keep deferring to somebody else. We keep looking for an Einstein. Einstein been dead for like, I don't know, maybe over near 100 years. We can't keep looking to other people, ascribing other people with the right gift set, with the right talents, with the right genius, and say, well, somebody else will handle that. Because Einstein, what he was exposed to is not what you were exposed to, even if he was alive. Other people who we deem to be geniuses, they haven't encountered what you've encountered. So they're on the other side of the world. They can't do anything about it. But you, myself, we have the power to do something. And we have to be able to recognize that by focusing on, man, what is it that I don't like? A lot of people don't, think the word hate is strong. And so it may be a little discomforting, like, I don't know if I want to say I hate a thing. We're not talking about people. We're talking about a thing, a brokenness that affects us. And so I have a strong example that really begins to illustrate how this works. But I want to hear from you first, Brittany, if you don't mind. Like, what is it that you hate?
Homelessness.
Hey, there it is. That is a brokenness in our society that is around all of us, and many of us will just turn a blind eye to it. So can I just hear a little bit about how that makes you feel when you see homelessness in a country that has this much wealth and resources?
Well, that's part of the issue. The wealth and the resources in the United States are so great and plentiful that to have a problem like homelessness it's the most ridiculous thing that you can imagine for a country that, though cash poor, has an unlimited credit card.
Right.
So how do you have children and veterans and people? I'm a military family, but how do you have people who are homeless in a country filled with homes? Right, even abandoned homes and space and land and a credit card where they could put these homes on, right? So it always breaks my heart for those that are unsheltered, especially those that did not choose this, right? There's a percentage of the population that are perfectly unsheltered, right? By design. They do not want to be habited in society the way we all think of traditional society. And that's fair. That's their decision.
Yep.
But you have the majority of homeless persons, the majority of unsheltered people, they don't desire to be homeless. They don't desire to be unsheltered. Life, circumstance, maybe they're in their own decision-making, systematic injustices have given them a homeless life. And it's heartbreaking. And it's such a problem that if you could take everybody in, you would. but you can't, there's no way to house everyone who is unsheltered, but I have an idea of how to do it.
Ah, you have an idea. That's interesting. I want to hear about it. I share some of that passion with you. My father had a passion for the unsheltered. And as I began to be older, I saw it begin to manifest in me. The city that I lived in, I live in South Carolina now, but I was living in Illinois for 20 years. And I would see the particular city that I lived in, like they were whole, homeless villages, places where they just kind of lined up along the river. And it would bother me that people would just act like they don't see them. And so I was the type of person, like I am the type of person where I'll like look them in the eye and at least speak to them. Like there's so much to do with being, if you don't have shelter, that's one thing, but you're still a person at the end of the day that deserves some type of respect. They deserve some type of acknowledgement. And I know it's a risk because there are some imbalances in that demographic, just like there's imbalances in our demographic. But to go about your day and encounter someone and treat them like they don't exist, that's diminishing. That's unnecessary, right? When I think about homelessness, I also think about, the waste that we have with our food and how, there's restaurants. Sometimes I try to think about it because it's overwhelming. The amount of food that I know goes to waste from grocery stores, the amount of food that I know goes to waste in restaurants that could just be repurposed. And I know people get into, well, there's liability, and you know what, we got to write some laws, something to make sure that we are doing better with the food that doesn't get eaten so that it doesn't go to waste. So I feel you completely. I did an emergency winter shelter. So, Illinois, Midwest winters, it's no joke. We had a polar vortex a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Where do you live, if you don't mind me asking? You don't got to say the state, but at least the region.
I'm originally from the West Coast. I live distinctly south now.
Okay. So you might not get a chance to see those type of winters, but the Midwest winters are no joke, right? So, there was an emergency winter shelter, and we made sure a couple of churches got together to make sure that we kept that place functional and opening all throughout the night so that people had a place to go so they wouldn't freeze to death. Yeah. Because that's how real it was. And I encountered people who was like, you know what, I choose to be unplugged. I choose not to. And now, like you said, that's their prerogative. But there were others who were just like, man, I was a paycheck away from this circumstance that's in my life now. So I appreciate you sharing that passion. If I can transition into a story, I want to tell you about 10 little boys that I met one time. So I have a friend who's a principal. It's always weird that I have friends that are principals now and teachers. You're an educator, and it's weird to be in that age group now. But hey, it is what it is. It's a blessing. So I had a teacher, a friend who was a principal. She's like, "Look, can you come through and just spend some time weekly with these 10 little boys? They're in third, fourth, and fifth grade, and they just need they were minority kids, and like they just need to see a positive role model in their life." So I'm like, "Bet I'm there." So I showed up, spent some time with them, and I was workshopping this idea of genius, and I figured I would test it out on them, right? I tested it out on my kids first, and then I kind of began to test it out on other people. And so one day I came into them and I said, "Hey, I need you all to know something. Each of you is a genius." And it was like, "Who are you talking to?" Like they immediately took offense to what I said. They immediately had this knee-jerk reaction, like, "Who? I think you got confused with who you coming to see, sir." Right? And so as I learned more and more about them, they were 10 boys in the third, fourth, and fifth grade, all in one class all day. They were on IEPs, or what we would have called special ed back in the day. They were deemed to have ADHD, ADD. They were deemed to be, emotionally, imbalanced, disruptive in class. And so they didn't know what else to do with them, but to put them in this one class with this one teacher all day and a teacher's aide. So already they're marginalized. Already the affirmations that they're used to are negative. So when I came with a positive affirmation, they kind of bucked at it like, "What are you saying?" And immediately after that, I remember they started roasting one another. I was like, "Oh, so y'all are more comfortable. You really are more comfortable with negative words being tossed your way than positive words." So I said, "Okay, I know what to do with this." And like I said, though adults, we get to this place where we're like, "Yeah, I don't want to say what I hate." Kids will tell you what they hate in a second. And that's how I get kids to talk anywhere I go. I ask that question. I'm like, "So, all right, cool. You don't want to be called a genius, fine. What do you hate though?" And Brittany, these 10 little boys that I had observed not being able to agree on what to play, when to play, whose chair was what, whose turn it was to talk, these boys that could never agree on anything, all universally told me the same thing. You want to guess what it is? Take one, I'll give you one guess what it is that they told me that they universally hated together.
I don't know.
So if you could ask the fish what it hated as it's trying to climb this tree every day and feeling like it's a failure because it can't climb the tree, what would you think the fish hated?
The fish will probably hate that it doesn't have hands to climb the tree. It's not equipped for what it's being asked to do. Like, you telling me to do this, and that's great, but I have fins, like it probably that people put pressure on it, that it can't achieve.
I'm not putting the pressure on this fish belong to a system. And the fish can't really see the system. The fish can only see the tree, what's in front of it. So I would wager that the fish hates the tree. These men, if they're coming into this environment every day, and this environment makes them feel like they don't belong, literally it makes them feel like a fish out of water because they're marginalized, then they're going to hate the environment. They're going to hate what they see every day. Every time they pull up in a school or they get dropped off to this building, they're like, I hate this place. They all told me bringing they hated school. It's like, I hate school. Now what, Mr. Key? And they just looked at me like, yeah, whatever you about to say, we just threw you a curveball. And I said, yeah, you threw me a curveball, but watch me knock this out the park though. I said, look, if you picking up what I'm putting down about how the thing that you hate is the thing that you were put on this planet to address, the thing that you were put on this planet to fix, the brokenness that you were put on this planet to fix, then you all just told me that you're future educators. And their eyes got big and they kind of backed up. And I was like, no, come closer. Like, why y'all get so quiet? Like, listen to what I'm saying. I was like, look, this gets back into the learning styles. I was like, there are 8 different learning styles, but schools are only teaching from 3. Now, before I go any further, as an educator, would you agree that the school system is broken?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right? And they're the proof of it. They're just a microcosm of the proof in the pudding that the school system is broken because it's failing them more than they're failing it, right? So 3 learning styles that I feel are representative in how things are taught in school. One is the left brain thinker. We alluded to that earlier. The person that's mathematically inclined comes from this hemisphere, right? So that's one learning style. The other learning style is that you're a visual learner. Things that you observe, things that you absorb and are able to process come through your eyes. And then there's a person who is verbal. They understand things by what's being spoken to them. But if you don't speak one of those 3 learning styles, then you're going to feel like, well, everything that you're saying, I don't understand it. It's getting lost in translation. So I began to talk about some of the other learning styles. I won't go into all 5 of them, but I want to focus on 3. I don't know why power of 3 is this thing that's kind of manifesting here, but there's obviously the opposite side of the left brain hemisphere. There's the right brain hemisphere, which is the creative side, the side that I believe Einstein did his thought experiments from, because he just was able to envision things and piece them together and process information, right? But if everything is taught from the other perspective, the left brain, then the right brain thinkers are going to be like, I don't belong here. I don't fit in. Here's where it gets interesting. There's something called and maybe you know these learning styles as an educator. So I hate to, maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but this is for the audience maybe. So then there's the kinesthetic learner. The kinesthetic learner has to move around to process information. But guess what? Every time they got up to move around the classroom, hey, sit down, be still. Their learning style was suppressed. I hate this place, right? And in our little boys, I believe that's a lot of athletes are kinesthetic learners, which is why they excel on the court and on the field, because they're allowed to process information in real time as they move. But you can't move in the classroom. And you're labeled in the classroom for being disruptive when you do that. Or how about the exploratory or expeditionary learner that has to put their hands on things to process it, has to pick it up and turn it around. But every time you go to pick up something, hey, keep your hands to yourself. Stop touching that. Man, my learning style is being suppressed. I hate this place. And so that's half of the solution. I told them, look, whatever your learning style is, it's a blessing to you, it's a gift to you, but it's going to be a gift to others, because if you take that learning style and go further in your education and become a teacher that teaches from your learning style, now you're going to reach other people who are feeling alienated and marginalized as well, because your learning style has become your teaching style. You're now supplementing the system with what it was missing, because you're showing a fourth learning style, a fifth learning style, a sixth learning style, and now the school system begins to be repaired. I'm not saying that that's the only thing wrong with the school system, but the failure to represent all 8 learning styles and have classrooms that are based around those learning styles, and then have the kids that are in that type of learning receive teaching in that same way, I think that's a major fail on the part of the school system. So I'm gonna stop right there. As an educator, I want to know your thoughts.
As a former, well, I guess once an educator, always.
Yeah.
But you're correct in that the school system can't possibly teach to the learning styles that most Black and brown children are equipped to learning by. We condition our children to learn by doing, and doing consistently, like making their bed and all of that. And then we send them to school and they can't put their hands on anything, right? They have to learn from a book or from writing on the board, right? And that's not practice. It's not a learned thing. Mm-hmm. So they get there and it challenges what they already know about how well they learn. And it begins to think like, well, I can't learn like other people. I must be dumb. Mm-hmm. You just don't learn in that way, right? So one thing I used to tell my students was every person, for the most part, learns differently. Some of us have just gotten better at hiding how we learn and adapting to what society wants us to do, but through regurgitation than anything else, right? So yeah, maybe I have better study habits than you, but that's just because I've been practicing the way society wants me to study instead of how I prefer to study. So it makes perfect sense that students who need school the most and students who have the most to gain from education would then in turn hate it because school makes them feel like they're dumb.
Yeah, you don't belong here. Nobody will ever say that out loud explicitly, but we're telling them we're leaving children behind. We're marginalizing the solution to the problem, how I see it. And so, that's indicative of not just the school system, but every system where human beings are involved and there's a way to do things, but everyone has to coalesce into, hey, you're a round peg, but I need you to fit into this square hole though. Mm-hmm. And like, that I don't feel comfortable with. Now you're on a performance plan, right? And so that's to me, if we can tap into the element of a person and get them in that place and get them to understand that the thing that makes them different is the thing that makes them special, and this is special in a good way, then we can begin to heal and repair a lot of the brokenness that's around us. Because what traumatizes us informs us, and that information that we receive is not just for us, but it's for other people who are going to come after us, who we can place them in a better position than what we were in. And so then that that allows us to transition into talent. Because let me ask you this, Brittany, like I see, you look like you're in some type of structure, a shelter, a house, or an apartment. I can't tell which one, but there are appliances in your house, right? And when an appliance breaks, which it inevitably does, when we go to assess it to figure out if we can fix the brokenness that's in our house, once we determine, like, I think I can fix this, what's the first thing we look for when we go to try and fix something?
Once I've determined what the problem is, I look for tools or some way to fix it.
You got it. You batting 1,000, Brittany. So when we encounter this brokenness that triggers our passion, the next logical question is, well, how do I fix it? I don't know what to do. And the solution is the next part of the 3-part equation, which is your talent. Your talent, our talent, is our tool to address and fix what's broken in the world. And I'll go ahead and get to the last part of the equation. Your purpose in life is to uncover or discover your talent. And we'll talk about how you discover it in a minute. and realize that you have something in your possession, a tool to fix the brokenness in the world that has traumatized you. And in doing so, you unlock your genius, because genius is, again, it's not about just uplifting you, but it's about uplifting people who are experiencing or may experience the same thing as you. Genius is nothing. Genius is a little bit about self-affirmation, but it's a lot about reaching and impacting others in a way that nobody else can. Right. And so when we get into talent, I love to the example that I love to give is from the Bible, is Moses. So when Moses figured out that God was like, hey, look, man, I need you to go deliver my people. He was like, yeah, I don't speak well though. He was like, God's like, I'm the one that made your mouth. I know what you can and can't do. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna give you your brother Aaron. He'll speak for you. Moses was still focused, like a lot of us do. He was still focused on what he couldn't do. He was like, yeah, I don't know, man. I stutter, man. I'm not the one. He was like, God was like, no, what's in your hand? And Moses was like, what? It's just this staff. It's my walking staff. He was like, man, put it on the ground. He put it on the ground. It turned into a snake. He said, pick it up by the tail. He picked it up and it turned back into a staff. Point is, he was like, you have everything you need in your hand already. And many times, though we're excellent at identifying other people as genius, though we're excellent at identifying other people's talent, and let me take it a step further, though we're excellent at identifying other people's generational talent, like we see generational talent in athletes and entertainers, we're like, oh, they come from a family of basketball players. That makes sense. They come from a family of musicians. So she's singing, that doesn't surprise me at all, right? But then we overlook ourselves and we don't, the thing that's common to us, we're just like, that's just what I do. And it's like, no, that's special. And it didn't just come out of nowhere. Like that's in your lineage. And maybe in previous generations, the resources and the opportunities were limited, but we're in a place now where more resources are available to us, more opportunities are available to our children, so that talent can be explored more and it can come to the surface more and begin to really stand out in front of us for us to put our hands on and to do a thing that our generations have been designed and destined to do. And so here comes my next question, aimed directly to you, Brittany. What do you say your talent is?
I serve really well. I'm always looking for ways to help people. And though it was and still is an insecurity for me, apparently I speak really well. Like everyone always needs to talk at things. So public speaking, which was an insecurity, might be my talent.
Okay. So you kind of identify with Moses. I'm not saying you stutter, but when the platform is presented to you, you're like, yeah, somebody else can do that. And everybody else is like, nah, you. That happened to me a lot too, especially in college, where I would look around and I'd be like, man, who's gonna do that? And everybody be like, you do. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. And so now the thing to do, Brittany, is to kind of take stock, take inventory, and be like, does this talent to serve, does this talent to speak exist anywhere else in my family? Because you need witnesses to kind of affirm yourself and be like, this, I thought that my talent to write and speak, kind of came out of nowhere when I was 19, when I was a freshman in college. But now, I begin to hear stories about my grandmother, how my grandmother wrote and my father wrote. And, my father loves, you put a microphone in front of him, he will go, right? To the point where you're like, can we turn him off, please? Because he's not stopping, right? And so the evidence began to mount in my favor for the talent that I now understand is in me and what I now identify in my children and encourage them like, hey, you're a wordsmith, right? And so I would attest that from what you're saying, at least, and you can have multiple talents, you can have multiple things that you hate as well. And so even as you're affirming like, hey, I have a talent for serving and I have a talent for speaking. And so, I very quickly, I hear the word public servant or the phrase public servant for you. You're one who exists in a public space, but who can see the things that are not being serviced by the masses and be like, you can speak up on this needs to happen. This needs to be done for this particular group of people. So in this moment, can you tell me a little bit more about what it sounds like you have a project when it comes to the unsheltered? Is this something that you're working on or have worked with in the past?
It's actually something I set down. It was part of my dissertation, actually, prior to me exiting my program.
Okay.
So yeah, a way to repurposing abandoned buildings for homeless communities, not just a shelter, a community, right? Because a lot of times when you speak with homeless people or when you go to serve homeless people, you feed dinner, go to, serve at a dinner or what have you,
Mhm.
only do these people need shelter. Shelter is just kind of the bottom of the need, right? Well, it's the foundational need, but it's not it, right? That doesn't top off for them. Shelter is just what they lack that we can see, right? But they also lack community. They also lack social resources. A lot of these people want to get back into society. A lot of these people only stepped out of society for financial reasons, and so they really, really miss community because people do pass them by
Yep.
asking for money, right? People pass them by on the street and don't even say, hey, how's your day going?
Right.
Or yeah, I get it. You're homeless and you're asking for money. It can't be a great day. But sometimes all it takes is asking a person, how's your day going?
How you doing? Yep.
Um, and they'll ask you, hey, you're having a good day. Sometimes, what we forget about people who are unsheltered is their need for community and their belongingness. Um, and so that's part of what I see as the solution is not just building shelters. There are shelters. They don't function in the capacity that they should have. They should, but there are shelters. Not all of them are doing a great job. Some of them are doing more than they can.
Yeah.
And what's lacking is sheltered communities whereby homeless persons can get their dignity back.
Yeah. That's major.
Right. And so you have a community. If you have a homeless community, then people work, people go to school, people meet up at the community center, they play games, they go home, they look out for each other. Right? It's a community. And then these same people who were homeless at one point in time have been given the resources to be and get equipped to get back into traditional society.
Yes. So do you have a name for this initiative that you've been, I want to say you're spearheading it. I'm gonna go ahead and say you're spearheading it. I don't care what stage it is, it is that you're in. You're envisioning this. So I'm gonna say you're spearheading it. Do you have a name for this initiative or this program, what you would call it?
No, it's honestly just in conception. It spun out of um, my dissertation was going to be about homeless, unsheltered veterans because I come from a family of people who've been in the military, who served in the military, right? And so that's kind of how it spun out. But then you realize, okay, well, not all unsheltered people are veterans. Okay, well, why else would people be unsheltered? And the questions just kept, coming to get answered. And so then it becomes, well, how can, you provide a community and not just a shelter?
This is beautiful though, because, you know, I know I put you on the spot a couple times, but you were able to ascertain, you're like, yeah, my talent is that I serve. And then you said it 2 or 3 times though, that you come from a family of people who do military service. So it's been there.
Oh,
Though,
yeah.
though it was localized to the military, the word service is still there though. And that's a sacrifice. Hey, look, there's a purpose greater than myself that I want to plug into and I want to serve, right? I want to protect the people. I want to make sure that they have security, right? And so I hear that in you. And yeah, it might have started off focusing on veterans because that's what you saw within your household. But then the right question was asked. Well, it's not just everybody that's that's a veteran that's homeless. What else is causing this to come about? And so even as I said earlier, public servant, I see you getting into, because the only thing that's going to help bring your vision to pass are the right resources and the right mindsets to broaden. Because right now, like you said, the shelters are very narrow. And, you know, the emergency winter shelter that I did, I mean, it shut down once it got, you know, a certain threshold in degree. After a while, you know, it didn't function. They're back on the street, but it's not, you know, it's not cold enough. And so there's a system that you're saying that needs to be built a community that needs to be built. And I'll be honest with you, Brittany, to build that type of community, you need to not only get the ear of uh, uh, people who are public servants, people who are councilmen, people who are governors and things like that. You may need to enter into the ring yourself. I'm just putting it out there. I'm just looking at where the equation is adding and how it's coming together. I talk about the equation as a puzzle a lot of times, and even though it's only three pieces, if you think about the average puzzle is like 500 pieces. When you begin to put the pieces together and the vision begins or the picture begins to reveal itself, sometimes it takes to move this picture, this piece needs to go this way and this piece needs to go this way. And we may fail at getting the bigger picture at first, but if we keep maneuvering around, it'll begin to reveal itself. And that's what's revealed to me and you right now. But of course, it has to take you to see it as well. And that's what this is all about, to begin to put the pieces together. And so I like I said, I appreciate your vision. I share in that passion. And I see it as the genius that's beginning to be unlocked on the inside of you. It's not just something to be written on a dissertation in a piece of paper. It's something to be acted upon, because when we see it not being like, I'll give you an example. So I'm asked, I moved down here 2 years ago, but where I was living, I had made a connection with this high school. And the high school, once I moved away, they were like, hey, can we keep the connection? We can do virtual meetings. And so I began meeting with some young men that they wanted to, empower. It's called the Youth Empowerment Program. And I met with them all semester, like 12 times virtually. And I was like, this isn't working though, because like they're feeding them while I'm talking over, I'm a face on a screen. And I'm like, I went there, and when I went in person, it was a completely different vibe. So I was like, everybody was saying like, oh, this is a success because we were able to do, it was the first year doing it. And I'm like, yeah, we executed it though, but we need to execute it better. I can't engage them properly from a screen for 40 minutes. When we got to set up the screen, it takes 10 minutes to set the screen up, 10 minutes to get them settled, to let them eat their food. By the time I really get into the meat of what I want to say to them and how I want to engage them, the bell is ringing. So I was like, just because we have a solution in place doesn't mean it's the best solution or the best initiation of that solution. And so that's what I kind of hear you saying, like, yeah, there are shelters in place, but we need something better. We need something more engaging. We need a community that can begin to equip them and bring them back into functionality.
That's correct.
That's correct. So Brittany, we've kind of come to the end of our time together. And I told you that I want to end the interview the same way we started. And this is up to you, however you choose to answer is how you choose to answer. But I'm going to ask you again, Brittany, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
No.
You said it fast too, like, no. And that's okay.
Explore makes me think that more people than not have genius potential. Mm-hmm. We just necessarily know that genius is a spectrum. And your genius doesn't have to look like Albert Einstein's genius because his tree was physics and you're not a physics person, So it makes sense that genius would look different for everyone across the based on your talents and what you're passionate about and what you were put here to do.
Yeah. So see, that's all I asked. You've internalized it. And I consider this to be a seed. This is a seed planting that's happening right now. And so even if right now you're like, nah, I don't see it, like hopefully eventually you'll begin to see some things, and you're already manifesting it. So you're already walking in it as far as I see. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to allow me to talk to you, having just met me today, and to be my special guest on Inkwell Spoken Presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I've been your host, Reggie Key, and whether she believes it or not, this has been my genius guest, Brittany Lee. And Brittany, it's my uncommon cue to see the genius in you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at Inkwell Spoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.